So about 6 or 7 years ago, I made this edit of Carlton Haney explaining some music theory.
Pythagoras, a Greek mathematician, set that up. Monroe never let two instruments play in the same octave. That's the secret of bluegrass. Keep every instrument in a separate octave, because Pythagoras set it up and gave the A note 440 vibration.
So if you've ever seen a bluegrass musician joke about Pythagoras, this clip is probably why. Now there's a longer video of this incident that has been around forever in some incarnation. I didn't invent this meme or discover this video. I'm not trying to take credit for it. I just made an edit that made it go viral through the bluegrass community again. You might be asking, Marcel, why would you bother to do that? Well, I thought it was funny, and the original video is like 20 minutes long, and ain't nobody got time for that. Now, Carlton Haney might be a little bit of a character, and he might be a big talker, but he did a lot of good for the country and bluegrass scene. He managed a lot of acts, he booked a lot of tours, he created the first multi-day bluegrass festival, and a bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to get into in this video. Go hop on Wikipedia and learn yourself something. My point in saying that is that this man has been inducted into the International Bluegrass Music Association's Hall of Fame, and I can bet that you haven't received that honor. Though it seems like a pretty big shame for someone who has had such a huge influence on bluegrass culture to just be reduced to the Pythagoras guy. And hey, quite frankly, I don't want to be remembered as one of the guys that diminished his legacy into just the Pythagoras guy. So welcome to the redemption of Carlton Haney. We're going to go through his unhinged music theory rant and discover just how hinged it really is. Okay, so you're not going to watch the 20-minute original video, even if it's only like the first 5 minutes that matter. I get that, I understand that, but I'm going to put a link in the description, so if you're stuck at your nephew's Little League game or something, you got to kill 20 minutes, go for it, knock yourself out. For everyone else, here's a quick speed run of the 10-round music theory boxing match that we have scheduled today.
Now I'm going to tell you something on this thing that's never been told and published yet, and his first time he's or anybody else has ever heard it. There's 5 instruments in bluegrass music. The bass is in one octave, the guitar is in one octave, the banjo's in one octave, and the fiddle and the mandolin are in the high octave. Octave is 10 notes. When you double a note, that's an octave higher. Monroe never let two instruments play in the same octave. That's the secret of bluegrass, because Pythagoras set it up and gave the A note 440 vibration. And he made mathematical formulas for chords. Out of the 12 notes, 1, 5, and 8 is every major chord. He raised the tenor 2 half tones to a double augmented fourth, and that's what he sung. Pythagoras took the 12 notes and took a formula and made a scale called diatonic scale. Bill Monroe created his own scale, and he's got 5 half tones at the top, and it makes the tenor shoot up, and that's how he got that high tenor.
So I guess we gotta give points or something, right? We gotta make it a game. So how about every time we can make sense of Carlton Haney's music theory, we'll give him a point, and every time we're confused, we'll give a point to Jimmy Martin because he's confused throughout this whole video. Okay, and welcome to the very first sentence that Carlton Haney says in this rant.
Now I'm going to tell you something on this thing that's never been told and published yet, and his first time he's or anybody else has ever heard it.
This is obviously an exaggeration. I think that Carlton Haney is being a good promoter here. He's obviously drawn a crowd, so it's working. But any copy of Tonal Harmony has like all of this information. You can just go pick it up at the library if you still use one of those. And it's probably explained way better. Carlton Haney does cover some bluegrass-specific information, but it's kind of dubious quality. Although he's not wrong. His sentence, you know, that this is something that's never been heard or published before, I mean, that's nothing about the quality of what he's going to say. I mean, I've never personally heard a rant like this before. So how about we give both teams half a point? I'm confused, but also I think Carlton's saying the truth here.
There's 5 instruments in bluegrass music. The bass is in one octave, the guitar is in one octave, the banjo's in one octave, and the fiddle and the mandolin are in the high octave.
Carlton's second point that he just made is that all 5 bluegrass instruments, sorry dobro players, we're ignoring you right now, play in separate octaves. So he proves this by pointing out that the upright bass has an open A string and it's A1. It vibrates at 55 hertz. The guitar's open A string is A2, vibrates at 110. The banjo doesn't have an open A string, but its lowest A is A3, that's 220. And lastly, the open A strings on the fiddle and mandolin are A4, vibrating at 440. You probably heard A equals 440, that's why. Now the last part of his point is that the mandolin and the fiddle trade chopping duties, and for the most part they don't play lead at the same time. Now this all sounds and looks airtight until you look at the standard tuning of these instruments. You'll notice that 4 out of 5 of them share the same open G string. So let's take a look at the full ranges of these instruments instead, because these 5 instruments play a lot more than just A notes. So now you can probably see that there is a considerable overlap between the guitar, banjo, mandolin, and fiddle. But let's analyze a common scenario. Let's say this bluegrass band is playing over a G chord and the fiddle player is soloing. So the bass player will be playing roughly in the first octave. The guitar player's bass walks will be in the second octave. Their strums will be in the third and fourth octave. The banjo would be playing in the third and fourth octaves as well. And the mandolin chop and the fiddle lead would be most prominent, probably in the fourth and fifth octave. So it's not really a perfect split by octave, but everyone is relatively carving out their own frequency range. More importantly, though, there is a difference in timbre and timbre. That's a little music theory joke, because the banjo doesn't have a wooden body like the other instruments. The banjo has such a unique sound that its overlap with the guitar can kind of be justified away. The overlap between mandolin and fiddle has already been explained by Haney in his initial statement, so yeah, he's kind of right. Each instrument is in its own lane either by frequency range or timbre. This kind of variety gives a standard bluegrass lineup a full sound without the instruments sitting on top of each other and becoming mud. So his statement that they're in different octaves is a small exaggeration, but I think that's still a point to Carlton Haney. I think that the core idea that he's laying down is true. Give him a point.
Octave is 10 notes. When you double a note, that's an octave higher.
So this is one of the statements that I see getting memed on all the time. Why would Carlton say that there's 10 notes in an octave? That doesn't make sense. I hear you saying there's 12 notes in the chromatic series. You know, could Carlton Haney really have been referring to some kind of 10-note equal division of the octave? Well, that does exist. Here's a chiptune song that I found on YouTube in like 2 minutes, and it's using that exact 10-note scale. Now that is surprisingly consonant sounding, right? There's a bunch of different tuning systems out there and they don't all sound weird. It's a big world is what I'm telling you. This would be an example of macrotonal music. So it's got less than 12 divisions of the octave. Microtonal music would be if you had more than 12 divisions of the octave. For instance, you could have 31 divisions of the octave, but we don't have time to go there. Oh, what's that? I've just received a breaking update from my right hearing aid. It looks like Carlton Haney has issued a retraction.
He created 12 notes of music. Pythagoras did. When you get to the 13th one, you double the vibration.
Yeah, that's right. If you just keep watching the video, Carlton Haney just corrects himself later on. He just misspoke early on in the clip. So I've personally generated more than enough pissed off comment sections by not being clear with my words, and I have experience with this one, is what I'm saying. So I've probably already made a mistake in this video, and there's people roasting me in the comment section right now. So this statement is just taken out of context. Carlton Haney demonstrates multiple times that he knows that there's 12 notes in the chromatic series, so it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, as musicians of all people, you'd think would know that it's okay to make mistakes. It takes a lot of mistakes to get good at what we do. So that's a point for Carlton. No, he didn't forget 2 notes.
Monroe never let 2 instruments play in the same octave. That's the secret of bluegrass. Keep every instrument in a separate octave.
Now here's where I have some beef. Carlton Haney does say that Bill Monroe invented this idea of every instrument being in a different octave, And that's like the secret of bluegrass. But that's just good arranging and instrumentation. Like, why do you think orchestras are assembled the way they are? It's literally the exact same concept. You want a variety of different voices in your ensemble. This does not qualify as a secret. It has no exclusivity to bluegrass. So that is a loss for Carlton Haney, and that is a point for Jimmy Martin. Still a pretty close match. Carlton Haney has got an early lead.
Because Pythagoras set it up and gave the A note 440 vibrations. If an octave is doubling, the A underneath that would be 220 vibrations.
Okay, so now Carlton Haney is going to ramble on about how octaves work. And to be fair, we do normally attribute this like 1-to-2 or 2-to-1 ratio of the octave to Pythagoras. And also all of his math is correct. I got beef with Pythagoras for a different reason, but we'll get to that maybe next round. Now, Pythagoras didn't come up with the A equals 440 standard that we use today. I gave Hayes Griffin a call. He's a fellow LWM instructor, and he said, and I quote, "Some German dude in 1834 came up with it, and us Americans didn't recognize it until 1936. There you go. Also, if you're going to leave like a conspiracy comment about A equals 432, your heart is in the right place, and I appreciate that, but now's not the time. So you can just keep that to yourself. Thank you. Setting all that aside, Carlton Haney's math shakes out, though. I think that Carlton Haney just attributed the 440 like frequency thing to Pythagoras out of simplicity. You know, it's like, know your audience. He doesn't have time to explain the German dude that Hayes told us about, so instead, he's just going to tell them that Santa is real, and he's going to move on. So that's a point for Carlton Haney.
And he made mathematical formulas for chords.
I think that I'm going to do a little rant of my own here and point out that Pythagoras probably didn't even exist. If he did, he probably didn't do all the stuff that we've attributed to him. So basically, the most famous books about Pythagoras were written like 800 years after he died. 800 years is a long time. That'd be like if the first published reference to George Washington didn't come out until like 600 years from now. Now here's a quote from one of those books. "And while he was crossing the river Cosus, he, with others, heard the river say, with a voice beyond human strength, 'Pythagoras, hail!' At which those present were greatly alarmed." That's right. That book just said that Pythagoras got catcalled by a river. That sounds like the actions of a fictional dude to me. That doesn't sound like real life. So anyway, these books were written by Pythagoras' cult following, and when I say cult following, I mean that Pythagoras was probably a cult leader. He famously told everyone not to eat beans and like a bunch of other crazy stuff. I don't know if he even really existed. Historians, do your thing, go nuts in the comment section and tell us the true Pythagoras lore, because I'm doing a little bit of, hyperbole to make my point here, but there are definitely some kind of mystical qualities to his supposed history. So yeah, what I'm saying is that if everything you know about Pythagoras is from Donald Duck and Mathmagicland, then sure, Pythagoras invented formulas for chords or whatever. Let's give a point to Carlton Haney. And just to be totally clear, the reason I'm giving the point to Carlton Haney is that even though he's saying that Pythagoras invented this stuff and that might not be true, we're still teaching some of this stuff in school. So we don't have time to tackle the historical accuracy of higher music education. We can dismantle the system another day. Viva Mexico.
Out of the 12 notes, 1, 5, and 8 is every major chord.
Okay, so now Carlton Haney says that 1, 5, 8 is the formula for every major chord. If you lower the 5th down to the 4th, you're creating a minor chord. If you lower the 8 to the 7, you're making a diminished chord. So resetting back to 1, 5, 8, we raise 8 to 9, and that creates an augmented chord. But wait, This isn't how triads work, I hear you saying. We know that triads are built out of 1, 3, 5. A minor chord would be 1, flat 3, 5. 1, flat 3, flat 5 for diminished. 1, 3, sharp 5 for augmented. And Carlton Haney's chords have 8s in them. That's not even used in jazz theory. Like, that's not a common chord extension. What's going on here? Well, some of the astute among you have probably already figured this out. Carlton Haney is actually right here. This is an absolute win. What's going on here is he's using a different numbering system than you might be used to. So he's counting half steps instead of scale degrees. So as Haney said, if we're talking about a C chord, the 1 is C, then 5 semitones away is E, and 8 semitones away from the C is a G. If you're counting scale degrees for the same chord, the 1 is C, the 3rd is E, and the 5th is G. This is all correct, just 2 different perspectives, and that is a point to Carlton Haney yet again.
Raise it to a 10, double augmented. And when Monroe sung Sweetheart of Mine, Can't You Hear Me Calling, how many times with Mac Wiseman that high note, he raised the tenor 2 half tones to a double augmented 4th, and that's what he sung.
Okay, so this one was a real puzzle. I've been working on this for like a week and a half, and I even consulted a bunch of friends to try to get like more perspectives. It'll take everything that we've learned so far, but I'm excited to solve the mystery of the double augmented 4th. First, let's talk through the information we just got from Carlton Haney. Haney says a double augmented chord is 1, 5, 10. Double augmented chords aren't really a thing. I'll show you why. We would spell a C double augmented as C, E, G double sharp. That's that little X symbol. Converting G double sharp to its enharmonic equivalent, basically the same pitch but a different note name, we'd get C, E, A, which is an A minor chord in first inversion. In the context of C major, this would just be the minor 6th chord. Now let's read Haney's statement again. Raise it to a 10, that's double augmented. And when Monroe sung Sweetheart of Mine, Can't You Hear Me Calling, how many times with Mac Wiseman, that high note, he raised the tenor 2 half tones to a double augmented 4th, and that's what he sung. Haney gets the lyrics wrong right there, by the way, but we don't care. We're here for the theory, not the lyrical accuracy. So at first glance, what Haney is saying is that the tenor part of this song changed the chord from C to C double augmented, or A minor. Let's look at what actually happens in the song. So this song is in G. The moment in question happens over a C chord, possibly a C7 chord. The lead vocalist is singing a G, and the tenor vocalist is singing a B natural and later a B flat over the same chunk of melody. This is not super common. Generally, we'd expect a tenor singer to sing a B flat or a C here, but never a B natural. Here's a chart of the possible chords the band is playing, the possible tenor notes a tenor singer could sing, and the chords that would result from those combinations. Note the weird C7 major 7 chord. I'm not even sure how to write that, but that's something that comes up in Monroe's singing and playing frequently. So I suspect that this is what Carlton Haney is trying to explain when he says double augmented 4th. The problem is, nowhere on this chart is there an A minor chord, and that's what Haney is building with his formula for a double augmented chord. So that must mean we're misunderstanding something. Let's look at the possible ways we're misunderstanding Carlton's statement. What does double mean in this context? Are we using the word augmented in a musical sense or not? Does 4th come up in reference to scale degrees, the Nashville number system, or half steps? Surely one of these is the misunderstanding we need to solve this mystery. Solution 1. Haney is using the word augmented wrong, and 4th is in reference to scale degrees. Normally, if a lead vocalist is singing a G, the tenor vocalist would sing the note a third above, which would be a B note. But if you augment that note, assuming Haney thinks that making something augmented is just raising it a half step, you'd get a C. Maybe Haney forgot there was no B sharp in between B and C and thought he would have to move the tenor part twice. Either way, this ends up with the tenor singing a 4th interval above the lead and singing the 4th degree of the scale. This accounts for the word double, augmented, and 4th, but it has some other problems. The first being, Bill Monroe doesn't sing a C, he sings a B or a B flat. Remember that from the chart earlier? Also, Haney has to forget that B sharp doesn't exist for this note to be double augmented. So I think there's just too many assumptions happening here. So the next thing I found was solution 2. Haney is making his infamous double augmented chord, but maybe he's confused about what chord is happening in the song, and the fourth is in reference to an interval inside the chord. See, if Haney thinks this song doesn't go to the 4 chord, but it goes to the 5 chord, or D chord right here, then the math shakes out again. A normal D chord would be 1, 5, 8, using half steps like Carlton. And if we use Haney's formula for 1, 5, 10, we do get a B on top. So the note that Bill Monroe actually sings in the song and the distance between the second and third notes of the chord is a fourth. Once again, this accounts for the use of the words double, augmented, and fourth, but it has some problems. First of all, it requires Haney to not know the chords to a song that he's doing a deep analysis of, and this solution doesn't reference the note that the lead vocalist would be singing at all. And when you include that note, it basically breaks the whole thing. Which brings us to solution 3. Haney is confused about what the tenor note is and is referring to half steps when he says fourth. If we're in the key of G and the lead vocalist is singing a G, we could count up 4 half steps to find B flat. That's a note that we said was kind of a standard choice. If we augment that note twice, or in other words, raise it 2 half steps, we end up with a double augmented fourth. This solution also accounts for the words double, augmented, and fourth, but has some more problems, like you probably guessed. Why would Haney make a big deal about a standard choice, and why would Haney not know the tenor part that he's actively analyzing? I guess what I'm saying is that I can make the words work if I try to get into the mind of Carlton Haney, but each solution revolves around a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. But what gets me is how matter-of-factly he says it. It's like he's trying to make a point, but he's just misspeaking somewhere. I desperately want to give him a point for something, like a style point or something, but there are no participation points here, so that will be a point for Jimmy Martin.
Pythagoras took the 12 notes and took a formula and made a scale called diatonic scale. Go 2 notes, 2 notes, 1 note. 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes, 1 note.
Here's another fun one. Pythagoras didn't invent the diatonic scale. That was just a slow evolution that lots of people had their hands in. Pythagorean music theory is really a lot more like physics, rather than like a practical way to make music. Pythagorean music theory takes the length of strings and uses them to divide them into intervals and discover ratios, that kind of thing.
Plunk it. Now divide in half. Plunk again. You see? It's the same tone, 1 octave higher.
Once again, Donald Duck and Math Magic Land will give you all the answers you need if you're interested in something like that. It's on YouTube. Go look it up. What's more interesting is that with just discovering an octave, fourths, and fifths, you can construct the entire chromatic scale. I'll show you how to do it. We start with any note. Let's go with C. Then we move down a fourth, we move up a fifth. That gives us F and G. Then we push those 2 notes into the same octave and test for fourths and fifths off of these new notes. We get B flat and D. We push those notes into the same octave and go again. We discover E flat and A. One more time for A flat and E. Again for D flat and B. Finally, we get G flat as the last note, and congratulations, you discovered the circle of fifths. So no, Pythagoras didn't invent or create the diatonic scale. He created the chromatic scale, or discovered the chromatic scale, let's say, which Carlton Haney is obsessed with. He uses it all the time. So I think we might be able to call this one a misspeak. The next thing that Carlton Haney does is he explains the diatonic scale, a formula for it that goes 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Or as we would more commonly say today, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, which is exactly right. So all of this is above board, and we'll give him a pass for mixing up diatonic and chromatic. It's not a big deal in this context. It makes sense. So that's a point for Carlton.
Bill Monroe created his own scale. He meant B to C, which is a half tone. He put it first. B to C to D to E to F to G to A to B again, and then he raised G to G sharp and A to A sharp to B, and he's got 5 half tones at the top, and it makes the tenor shoot up, and that's how he got that high tenor. He created his own scale.
If anything you just heard makes sense to you, please leave a comment and explain it to the rest of the class. One possible solution I have for this is that Carlton Haney might be starting with a B minor scale. He's just not saying all of the sharps and flats, which can be kind of common in like a country musician kind of way. They won't say B flat chord, they'll just say B chord. So B minor would be B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. And then he's saying that Bill Monroe raises the 6 and the 7. So we end up with B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. Are you following? So that's like half minor in the first half and then half major in the second half. And so Haney might be saying that Bill Monroe likes to sing like the minor third. That's why it starts kind of minor and then the rest of the scale is kind of major because, I don't know, I'm reaching. This might be easier to conceptualize as like tetrachords, but I'm not going to make a graphic for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. The problem with all of that is Carlton Haney explicitly says that Bill Monroe puts the half step first. He goes from B to C, which would make this some kind of Phrygian something or other. It's gibberish as far as I can tell, which makes our final score 6.5 out of 10 for Carlton Haney. That is passing. As the kids say these days, D's get degrees. Which means that, though he is not great at explaining it, I bet Carlton Haney knows more music theory than some of you watching this video. In other words, y'all should find someone else to pick on. Leave Carlton Haney alone. Oh man, this whole thing ended on like a Leave Britney Alone reference. That's not good.